The day my family fell apart and found each other again. I grew up thinking our family was like any other, a little messy, a little chaotic, but full of love. My parents, Rajesh and Anita, had their fights, sure, but they always made up in time for dinner. My older brother, Samir, and I, Ariv, had the usual sibling rivalry, pranks, arguments, and the occasional fight that ended in laughter. Life seemed ordinary, maybe even boring, but ordinary has a way of shattering in a single day. It was a Friday morning, and I had woken up to the usual chaos. Samir's alarm blaring from across the hall, Mom scolding Dad for leaving dirty dishes in the sink, and the smell of tea brewing in the kitchen. But that morning, there was something different, a tension in the air I couldn't name. Dad came into my room, holding a letter. His hand was shaking slightly, and I noticed that he wasn't smiling like he usually did. "Ariv, sit down," he said, voice unsteady. I did, my heart thumping. Mom walked in, her eyes red. I hadn't even seen her cry in years. "We need to talk," she said. And that's when I learned that our family's ordinary life had been hiding a storm. Dad had lost his job 6 months ago. He'd been pretending to go to work every day, leaving early, coming home late, even taking Samir and me to the park so we wouldn't notice. Mom had been keeping it together, managing bills, making sure groceries were bought, never letting us see the panic in her eyes. I didn't know whether to feel angry or sad. I felt both and more. Samir stormed in from upstairs after hearing us. "What's going on?" he demanded. Dad looked at him, then at me, then back at Mom. "We're in trouble," he admitted. "Financial trouble." The words hit me like a punch. Trouble wasn't something you could just clean up. Trouble was real, crushing, and heavy. I didn't know how to respond. Samir just sat there, silent, staring at the floor. We spent the morning sorting through bills. Every envelope we opened felt like another weight added to our shoulders. Rent, electricity, medical bills, all overdue. Mom explained how she'd taken on extra work at a boutique to help, but it wasn't enough. Dad had savings, but it wasn't nearly enough either. By lunchtime, tension had turned to despair. Samir finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Why lie?" Mom's hand shook as she wrapped around herself. "We wanted to protect you. We didn't want you to worry." But worrying is exactly what we did. The next few weeks were chaos. Our routine shattered. Dad applied for job after job, each rejection a reminder of how fragile our lives had become. Mom worked long hours and came home exhausted, barely able to cook dinner. Samir and I tried to help, but we were teenagers. Our contribution was mostly emotional support, which felt insufficient. It was during one of these evenings, sitting silently in the living room, that I realized something crucial. Family isn't about money or jobs or perfect houses. It's about showing up. Even when life is falling apart, you have to show up. And so I started small. I would help Mom with chores after school. I would encourage Dad when he felt like giving up. Samir, well, convincing him to do anything was harder. But slowly, he began helping too. We started a ritual. Every Sunday, no matter what, we would cook a meal together. It wasn't fancy, just rice, lentils, and sometimes vegetables, but it became our way to reconnect. We laughed, we argued, we burnt the rice sometimes, but it was ours. And then came the day that changed everything. Dad got a call from a small company that needed someone in management. It wasn't his dream job, but it was a start. He cried that night in the kitchen while chopping vegetables. Mom held him, and Samir and I stood silently, not needing to say anything. That night, we ate together. For the first time in months, it felt like hope had returned. But hope isn't a straight line. Just when things seemed to stabilize, Mom fell ill. The stress, the exhaustion, the constant anxiety, it all caught up to her. She ended up in the hospital for a week. Dad barely left her side. Samir and I took turns visiting, doing homework, and keeping the apartment running. It was during this week that I realized the true depth of my parents' sacrifices. They had shielded us from pain for years, only to endure it themselves in silence. Watching Mom sleep, pale and weak, I felt a surge of gratitude and guilt at the same time. Months passed. Slowly, we rebuilt. Dad's new job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Mom recovered and returned to work, more determined than ever. Samir and I found ways to contribute, not just emotionally, but practically, helping wherever we could. One evening, sitting on the balcony, Dad said something I'll never forget. "You boys remind me why it's worth fighting, no matter how hard it gets." I looked at Samir, and we shared a quiet smile. Despite everything, the financial struggles, the illnesses, the fear, we were still together. And that made all the difference. Life doesn't promise smooth sailing. But I learned something invaluable through those months. Love doesn't always make life easy, but makes life bearable. It's messy, imperfect, sometimes painful, but it's ours. That's what family is. 98.6% of you guys aren't subscribed. If you want more stories like this, like, share, subscribe, and comment down below what was your favorite part of the story.